When we find a man who has ascended heights beyond ourselves, who has a broader range of vision than we, and a sky with more stars in it than we have in ours, we may know that he has worked harder, better, and more wisely than we. He was awake while we slept. He was busy while we were idle, and was wisely improving his time and talents while we were wasting ours. Paul Dunbar, the colored poet, has well said, "There are no beaten paths to glory's height. There are no rules to compass greatness known. Each for himself must cleave a path alone, and press his own way forward in the fight. Smooth is the way to ease and calm delight, and soft the road sloth chooseth for her own. But he who craves the flower of life full blown must struggle up in all his armor dight. What though the burden bear him sorely down, and crush to dust the mountain of his pride? Oh, then with strong heart let him still abide, for rugged is the roadway to renown. Nor may he hope to gain the envied crown till he hath thrust the looming rocks aside. I am certain that there is nothing good, great, or desirable which man can possess in this world that does not come by some kind of labor of physical or mental, moral or spiritual. A man, at times, gets something for nothing, but it will, in his hands, amount to nothing. What is true in the world of matter is equally true in the world of the mind. Without culture there can be no growth. Without exertion, no acquisition. Without friction, no polish. Without labor, no knowledge. Without action, no progress, and without conflict, no victory. A man that lies down a fool at night, hoping that he will waken wise in the morning, will rise up in the morning as he laid down in the evening. Faith, in the absence of work, seems to be worth little, if anything. The preacher who finds it easier to pray for knowledge than to tax his brain with study and application will find his congregation growing beautifully less and his flock looking elsewhere for their spiritual and mental food. In the old slave times, colored ministers were somewhat remarkable for the fervor with which they prayed for knowledge, but it did not appear that they were remarkable for any wonderful success. In fact, they who prayed loudest seemed to get least. They thought if they opened their mouths, they would be filled. The result was an abundance of sound with a great destitution of sense. Not only in man's experience, but also in nature do we find exemplified the truth upon which I have been insisting. My Father worketh, and the Savior, and I also work. In every view which we obtain of the perfections of the universe, whether we look to the bright stars and the peaceful blue dome above us, or to the long shore line of the ocean, where land and water maintain eternal conflict, the less taught is the same, that of endless action and reaction. Those beautifully rounded pebbles which you gather on the sand, and which you hold in your hand and marvel at their exceeding smoothness, were chiseled into their various and graceful forms by the ceaseless action of countless waves. Nature is herself a greater worker and never tolerates, without certain rebuke, any contradiction to her wise example. Inaction is followed by stagnation. Stagnation is followed by pestilence, and pestilence is followed by death. General Butler, busy with his broom, could sweep yellow fever out of New Orleans, but this dread destroyer returned when the general and his broom were withdrawn, and the people, neglecting sanitary wisdom, went on ascribing to divinity what was simply due to dirt. From these remarks, it will be evident that, allowing only ordinary ability and opportunity, we may explain success mainly by one word, and that word is work. Work, work, work. Not transient and fitful effort, but patient, enduring, honest, unremitting work into which the whole heart is put, and which, in both temporal and spiritual affairs, is the true miracle worker. Everyone may avail himself of this marvelous power if he will, There is no royal road to perfection. Certainly, no one must wait for some kind of friend to put a springing board under his feet, upon which he may easily bound from the first round of their ladder onward and upward to its highest round. If he waits for this, he may wait long and perhaps forever. He who does not think himself worth saving from poverty and ignorance by his own efforts will hardly be thought worth the efforts of anybody else. The lesson taught at this point by human experience is simply this: that the man who will get up will be helped up, and the man who will not get up will be allowed to stay down. This rule may appear somewhat harsh, but in its general application and operation it is wise, just, and beneficent. I know of no other rule which can be substituted for it without bringing social chaos. Personal independence is a virtue, and it is the soul of which comes the sturdiest manhood. But there can be no independence without a large share of self-dependence, and this virtue cannot be bestowed. It must be developed from within. I've been asked, how will this theory affect the Negro, and what shall be done in this case? My general answer is, give the Negro fair play and let him alone. If he lives well, if he dies equally well, if he cannot stand up, let him fall down. The apple must have strength and vitality enough in itself to hold on, or it will fall to the ground where it belongs. The strongest influence prevails and should prevail. If the vital relation of the fruit is severed, it is folly to tie the stem to the branch, or the branch to the tree, or to shelter the fruit from the wind, or to shelter the fruit from the wind. So too, there is no wisdom in lifting from the earth a head which must only fall the more heavily when the help is withdrawn. Do right, though the heavens fall, but they will not fall. So this is a speech by Frederick Douglass called "The Self-Made Man." Not sure when it was given, but obviously there's a lot of talk about the Negro at this time. He was an advocate for former slaves, but I really am interested in, because this is not solely for African Americans, but also for men in general, and the concept of the self-made man, which he says it's not that we can make ourselves, but that we do have to be the driving effort behind our, let's say, our progress, right? A person's progress. So as long as there's no inhibitions, nothing causing too much resistance to, in an unfair way, one progressing, one improving, one growing in influence and prominence, then we should be left alone. So yeah, the speech is pretty long. I'm going to skip over some of the stuff specific to the Negro, as Frederick Douglass calls his race, and just try to find the generalities about manhood, about great men, and how they become great men. So let's see. Let's say, I have by implication admitted that work alone is not the only explanation of self-made men, or of the secret of success. Industry, to be sure, is the superficial and visible cause of success, but what is the cause of industry? In the answer to this question, one element is easily pointed out, and that element is necessity. Thackeray very wisely remarks that all men are about as lazy as they can afford to be. Men cannot be depended upon to work when they are asked to work for nothing. They're not only as lazy as they can afford to be, but I have found many who are a great deal more so. We all hate the taskmaster, but all men, however industrious are either lured or lashed through the world, and we should be a lazy, good-for-nothing set if we were not so lured and lashed. Necessity is not only the mother of invention, but the mainspring of exertion. The presence of some urgent, pinching, imperious necessity will often not only sting a man into a marvelous exertion, but into a sense of the possession within himself of powers and resources which else had slumbered on through a long life, unknown to himself and never suspected by others. A man never knows the strength of his grip till life and limb depend upon it. Something is likely to be done when something must be done. If you wish to make your son helpless, you need not cripple him with bullet or bludgeon, but simply place him beyond the reach of necessity and surround him with ease and luxury. This experiment has often been tried and has seldom failed. As a general rule, where circumstances do most for men, there man will do least for himself. And where man does least, he himself is least. His doing or not doing makes or unmakes him. Under the palm tree of Africa, man finds without effort food, raiment, and shelter. For him, there, nature has done all, and he has done nothing. The result is that the glory of Africa is in her palms and not in her men. In your search after manhood, go not to those delightful latitudes where summer is blossoming all the year long, but rather to the hardy north, to Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont, to the coldest and flintiest parts of New England, where men work gardens with gunpowder, blast rocks to find places to plant potatoes, where for 6 months of the year the earth is covered with snow and ice. Go to the states which Daniel Webster thought good enough to emigrate from, and there you will find the highest type of American physical and intellectual manhood. Happy for mankind, labor not only supplies the good things for which it is exerted, but it increases its own resources and improves, sharpens, and strengthens to its own instruments. The primary condition upon which men have and retain power and skill is exertion. Nature has no use for unused power. She abhors a vacuum. She permits no preemption without occupation. Every organ of body and mind has its use and improves by use. Better to wear out than rust out is a sound philosophy as well as common sense. The eye of the watchmaker is severely taxed by the intense light and effort necessary in order to see minute objects, yet it remains clear and keen long after those of other men have failed. I was told at the Remington Rifle Works by the workmen there employed, who have to straighten the rifle barrels by flashing intense light through them, that, by this practice, severe as it seems, their eyes were made stronger. But what the hands find to do much be done in earnest. Nature tolerates no halfness. He who wants hard hands must not, at sight of the first blister, fling away the spade, the rake, the broad axe, or the hoe. For the blister is a primary condition to the needed hardiness. To abandon work is not only to throw away the means of success, but it is also to part with the ability to work. To be able to walk well, one must walk on, and to walk with ease and effect, one must work on. Thus, the law of labor is self-acting, beneficent, and perfect, increasing skill and ability according to exertion. Faithful, earnest, and protracted industry gives strength to the mind and facility to the hand. Within certain limits, the more that a man does, the more he can do. That's good. Few men ever reach, in any one direction, the limits of their possibilities. As in commerce, so here, the relation of supply to demand rules. Our mechanical and intellectual forces increase or decrease according to the demands made upon them. He who uses most will have most to use. This is the philosophy of the parable of the 10 talents. It applies here as elsewhere. To him that hath shall be given, and from him that hath not shall be taken even that which he hath. Exertion of muscle or mind for pleasure and amusement alone cannot bring anything like the good results of earnest labor.